There's a common consensus amongst fan bases surrounding a lot of films and TV shows these days, particularly with larger franchises, that stories aren't getting the right treatment to which they deserve. To each of their own, however, there's been notable examples over the last few years where it's quite evident that a narrative has suffered to pursue what would be considered good business decisions. So this begs the question, what makes a great film or TV show? Is it the characters, the story, the visuals, the critical or audience response, or is it the popularity and box office numbers? Well, it definitely isn't the latter, which brings me to two pieces that share significant similarities but released in different times, showcasing different worlds. Blade Runner 2049, directed by Denis Villeneuve, and Andor, led by Tony Gilroy, occupy a deep level of continuity between their characters, the art and soul of which the world the narratives reside within, subtle storytelling, and relative viewership numbers. As a massive fan of the Star Wars universe ever since I was 6 years old,
I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. You're not the only one who lost everything.
to my favourite film being Blade Runner 2049, I couldn't stand by idle and not share the similarities between Andor and what's regarded as one of the greatest sci-fi sequels of all time. This is why the story of Andor is the Blade Runner 2049 of the Star Wars galaxy. Stories from the beginning of time are often defined by the foundation that is the arc of its protagonist. The protagonist's journey is crucial and often considered one of the most vital, if not the most vital element of a story. Commonly, these heroes are consistently astounding and aspirational to the viewer because fundamentally, as humans, we idolize these larger-than-life figures.
We are what they grow beyond.
It's why, as from children to adults, we have figurines and posters of the Luke Skywalkers, Ahsoka Tano's, and the Obi-Wan Kenobis of the world, but both Blade Runner 2049 and Andor break this story archetype, and put forward the notion that their protagonists are seemingly insignificant or heroes that don't matter. Blade Runner begins by showcasing us a man who's visibly oppressed by those that control him, one that conforms to how he's been designed and programmed, in a dystopian world where he has no contribution, significance, or perceived value to the world, one that is commonly looked upon as reductive from society. On the other hand, Andor again lives in an oppressed world, alone at times, and although not looked upon by others as reductively as Kay is, there are elements of it. But what's most common is that they're both just not special. No lightsabers, no godlike powers, no magic, nothing extraordinary. In fact, both these characters possess these lack of unique abilities that define your typical hero, and live in worlds governed by similar forces being bureaucracy, war and control that lead to conflict. In Blade Runner 2049, what controls Kay is evidently the LAPD in the beginning, the Wallace Corporation, and the Replicant Rebellion. All that leads to bureaucracy, war and control enticing conflict. Similarly, this can be distinguished in Andor, where his story is defined by the corporate authority in the beginning, the Empire, and organized rebellion factions. Now, it can be said that Cassian Andor's eventual demise that leads to the destruction of the first Death Star is a pivotal moment in Star Wars of which the entire timeline of a galaxy far, far away is based upon, and this event in fact is comparatively more important to Officer K's contribution in Blade Runner 2049, and that proposition can be made. However, Kay's sacrifice preventing the godlike Neander Wallace from perfecting artificial procreation is indeed a universe-altering event in a dystopian world. Both of these non-special individuals, Andor and Kay, rise up to do special things that alter the course of their respective universes, all whilst occurring in stories where these characters and their passings go unnoticed. Again, heroes that are insignificant.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
Both heroes ultimately are faced with existential choices that go against their purposeful programming. Andor makes the decision to never pull the trigger, a clear directive from his rebellion authority, and Kay chooses not to join the rebellion uprising. Both Kay and Andor aren't the chosen ones of their respective stories, but rather the ones that chose. It's not only through these characters where we find Andor and Blade Runner 2049 interlinked in many aspects, but further through how the stories are told. The art and soul of each narrative respectively are so similar, especially when compared to other films and TV shows that have been released in the last few years. Both narratives utilize similar technologies in production and post to craft the gritty and realistic worlds that we see on screen, as well as careful utilization of practicals and CGI to extend sets, rather than having such respective technologies dominate the frame. It's with no mistake that Andor takes visual references off of Rogue One. The entire 12 episodes are predominantly shot in real locations, such as Glentilde Park, the McLaren Technology Centre, and Brunswick Centre, London, to name a few, but also uses the same camera technology as Rogue One. Both films utilised either the Alexa Mini and Alexa 65 in majority of its production, and despite having different cinematographers leading the visuals for each project, both Rogue One and Andor, being shot years later apart, have a significant amount of continuity visually, almost as if they were filmed at the same time. Neither production relied on the volume, which has a plethora of benefits, but draws some downfalls that have become more noticeable over the years. Like these shots from the beginning of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, where upon closer inspection, it's clear where the set ends and the volume begins, which honestly really takes you out of the story. Instead, Andor heavily relies on sets and real locations first, providing texture, atmospherics, and a reality sensibility. Whilst having blue and green screens aid the extensions of such shots, you may be asking, what does this have to do with Blade Runner 2049? Well, if we take a look at these behind the scenes pictures here, many of which I've sourced from set photos shared by Roger Deakins, the Oscar award-winning cinematographer for this particular film, we can see a great deal of this technique used. When we watch Blade Runner 2049, the world around us honestly just disappears. And with the right screen and a good set of speakers, the bleak dystopian world of Los Angeles and the surrounding cities become our reality for almost 3 hours. The line between what was shot in camera and what was generated is truly blurred.
On a green screen, you are bound to a computer graphics that tell you where to put the camera and what the actor, where he will look like. I was so grateful that the production agreed from the start that we will build everything.
And that can't be said for a lot of other recent Star Wars media, where the magic is sometimes lost at times, but it's absolutely present in Andor. The clearest example of this are the dam extensions in Aldhani. It's absolutely a real dam on Earth, but enhanced, manipulated, and extended digitally in post. Tony Gilroy's approach to how Andor should be shot is quite similar to how director Denis Villeneuve approached filmmaking in general. He has the North Star of shooting as much in camera and struggles to conceptualize sets around him if it's plagued in a sea of blue.
You have all my admiration because you are, I think, working mostly in virtual environment, and I have no idea how you can survive, how you can do that, keep your creativity alive in those kinds of environment. It's amazed me the way you work.
You're clearly working also with visual effects and blending the two quite seamlessly. I mean, the last time I checked, there were no 400-meter long sandworms.
These approaches ultimately enhance the world building of the stories we witness and, moreover, heighten our immersion into such worlds. Another clearly noticeable similarity between these two stories that aid such immersion and world building are the approach to takes. Both Blade Runner 2049 and Andor take their time to tell a story. There's no rushing or speed pacing in the edit, especially when it comes to holding shots. These examples here are real shots that aren't edited or slowed down at all by me. We'll begin with Blade Runner 2049.
I want to ask you some questions.
Like what?
Like, what was her name?
And now Andor. These seriously contribute significantly to again immersing us in these worlds. like we're watching a replay or documentary of real events rather than a scripted farce of a typical franchise Hollywood blockbuster. Blade Runner and Andor further show their parallels through subtle storytelling strategies, detailed to showcase a character's motivations and thoughts without explicitly or verbally revealing their traits vocally, making these fictitious people seem more real, more human. Beginning with Andor, let's take a couple of scenes. Firstly, notice Vel's hesitation when jumping off the side of the Aldani Dam.
Are we going or not?
The slight movement and pause is so subtle yet conveys so much towards this character's nervousness. Next, the masterclass of editing and choice to showcase majority of Kino Loy's speech where he doesn't appear to blink.
Building is ours.
To illustrate a man that's endured the world and now willing to risk it all, with zero hesitation and complete focus. Luthen's transition from rebellion founder to luxury gift shop and politically correct socialite. Transitioning over to Blade Runner, similar subtleties include Deckard avoiding temptation when Wallace offers him the ultimate candy of heart desires by seemingly resurrecting the love of his life, Rachel. Deckard resists the temptation on the detail that an insignificant intricacy of his fallen partner, one that the godlike Wallace would never prioritize, but the subtlety isn't here. Where it lies is in fact that Rachel's eyes originally were never green. A depressing detail that demonstrates Deckard's resistance to conforming to Wallace's desire to dissect his child upon their discovery, and the personal sacrifice of not reuniting with his love again. Officer K has more examples of this than anyone, which may include these. K thinking that he was the chosen replicant, K realizing that after all this time, his love was really just a product made by a big corporation. And of course, how Ryan Gosling emits emotion upon discovering the horse, of which is in his memory, just to name a few. These are prime instances of pictures that are worth 1,000 words, showed with Andor and Blade Runner 2049 that emphasize the notion of show, don't tell. To conclude this comparison, the lasting yet most disappointing similarity between these sci-fi stories connected to our world today, both Blade Runner 2049 and Andor lacked what is perceived as financially production successes, with Denis Villeneuve's sci-fi's epic bombing at the box office as reported at the time, and Andor not reaching nearly as many views as critically less acclaimed TV shows on Disney+. Now, there's plenty of points in videos exploring why this is the case for each narrative, but common commentary that resides in reaction to both Andor and Blade Runner is that they're slow and boring. To contend this, slow isn't necessarily bad, and there's a clear difference between slow and boring. Slow enables a story to bleed atmosphere, build us up into a world and let it sink in. Boring means uneventful. Both Blade Runner 2049 and Andor are undoubtedly slow to their benefit, but never boring. They thrive because of their beautiful set designs, depth to characters and atmosphere as we as a viewer get to endure. To escape out of these worlds where the action spectacles are sparse, yet deeply impactful in every way. Andor is the Blade Runner 2049 of Star Wars, where we are presented with heroes that don't matter, that ultimately aren't the chosen ones, but the ones that chose. Both sci-fi stories pull us in deep through the art and soul that derives from set pieces, design, and visuals, whilst drawing us closer to these characters on screen through realistic subtlety of its people and absent quality in many other forms of modern entertainment. Yet, despite traces of disappointing numbers, we can only really hope that these artistic masterpieces act as the foundations of inspiration for future Star Wars stories to be told.
The 49 men in this room answer to me. I have 249 days left of my sentence.